Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. So today, Steve Donahue put out a video called a War Starter Kit, which is in keeping with the imminent BookTube event called BookTube at War, in which the goal is for participants to read a work either of fiction or non-fiction pertaining to war. I will give a link to Steve's video in the description. It brought to mind some war titles that I thought were of interest or would be of interest, and so I just thought I would make a video talking about them a little bit. Although Steve is a very hard act to follow. You have to keep in mind that when Steve Donahue makes a recommendation, he has read everything under the sun, he has weighed and compared them, and come up with what he thinks is the best choice of what's available. I, on the other hand, have read almost nothing. And indeed, one of the books that I am going to recommend I have not even read, but be that as it may, that's how I will do it. So one of the books that I recall reading that I liked very much was by Chris Hedges, What Every Person Should Know About War. I'm not sure if that's going to come through real well, by Chris Hedges, What Every Person Should Know About War. And it's a very good book if, say, you know somebody, a young person who is seriously considering enlisting in the military. And the book gives a lot of just basic information of things that a person should know about what serving in the military is like and what being in a war zone is like. Chris Hedges, of course, has plenty of first-hand experience with that. Now, years ago, I also read his book, War is a Force That Gives Us Meaning, and I came across it while I was looking for war books. And I remember liking it very much. But Chris Hedges is a writer for me that once I've been there, I don't tend to really care to go back to Chris Hedges that much. So take that with a grain of salt. His expiration date for me is not of long duration, although I do like his writing very much. Now I wanted to talk, first let me jump into the book that I haven't even read. And Steve talked about a book by Hans Delbrück, and he showed Warfare in Antiquity, History of the Art of War, Volume 1. Let's see if I can expand it here from Amazon. So that's what you have. I hope that can be seen. It's part of a 4-volume set which appears to cover war from antiquity to the present day, or rather to Hans Delbrück's present day, which is not very present, but possibly could use some updating by another hand to really bring it into our times. But I wanted to focus on the one volume that Steve showed, which was Antiquity, and show a book which I suspect is a very good book about war in antiquity, if that's what you're interested in. And this is War in the Ancient World, A Social History by Yvon Garlin, a French writer. I have not read this book, but I did read his book about ancient slavery twice, as a matter of fact, and liked it very much. Now, The reason I recommend this one unread is because it is part of the Ancient Culture and Society series, which was edited by M.I. Finley, in whom I have implicit trust. I've read several of the volumes in this series and not liked all of them, but nevertheless, I bet that there's something worthwhile here if you really want to delve into warfare in the ancient world. So one other thing that I just thought of in relation to Steve's video, he mentioned Sun Tzu, the Art of War, and Steve's general principle is you should just read whatever translation works for you. And I think that is an excellent principle. But if you want to take it to a step further and you find this translation and it looks acceptable to you, I do recommend this translation. Samuel B. Griffith was a general, and it has a foreword by B.H. Littlehart, and he's a very interesting writer to know if you want to read things about war. You can look him up on Amazon, and you'll find a plethora of titles all over the map. I recommend his biography of the great Roman general Scipio Africanus, if that's how you say his name. And I believe he has one of about the Nazi generals from World War II, in which they tell their own stories. I think I've looked at it. I have it somewhere long ago, so I don't quite remember. And I also found his edited version of the Rommel papers very good. I was trying to do a historic play about Rommel, and that project fell through. But nevertheless, I recommend Liddell Hart very much. So that's almost to the end of what I have to say. Now, one thing that Steve did not mention, he gave a source with some first-hand accounts, which I'm sure that is very good too. But I would also recommend reading some war poetry. Now, there are tons of anthologies out there. This is from the Everyman's Library, and it's just a general war poems. It's very good. Library of America has select volumes, so you can read poets of the Civil War. You can read poets of World War II. Of course, the critical war poets to read would be the war poets of World War I, and there are numerous anthologies covering that period. Steve might be able to point you in the direction to sift through the variety of offerings of those. The World War I hope I said World War I the first time. I don't know how to put those words across the screen when I misspeak. I think you're supposed to use an editing program, but I don't know how to do that as yet. But the poets of World War I are particularly worth attention. There was some sort of a literary fluorescence at that time, and I can't speak a bad word about any of them, but probably the poet above all that is an absolute is Wilfred Owen. And you don't even really need to read any of the others, but you do have to read Wilfred Owen. This, the edited by John Stallworthy, is probably the best edition. And here's a caveat with that. Some people hate Owen with a passion. Important poets have hated him with a passion. I believe William Butler Yeats was one of those. And another real important name who recently died, but I can't remember his name at the moment, so I won't even try. But reading Owen, you have to understand that he was very young, and he was matured into poetry by force of circumstance. He was, he's the closest thing to us equivalent to John Keats. And like John Keats, Keats has a dozen poems at best that are flawless perfection, a handful. Wilfred Owen might be even slightly less than that. I believe it may well have been the living year, as it is called for John Keats, that one miraculous year that pushed out all of his monumental poems. And with Owen, all of these things are worth looking at, but you will do just as well getting a good anthology probably, and they will put the best of his poems in there. And again, you're probably talking 7 poems, 8 poems. All the others are worthwhile if your aim is to find out about war. As poetry, they perhaps don't rise to the high level of his best. So I cannot speak highly enough of Wilfred Owen. I think that is what I have to say about war. Steve also did not go into war novels. I've read a few here and there, and fresh in my mind is Unknown Soldiers by, I can't remember his name, Vaino, I think is his first name, and I think his last name starts with an L. Unknown Soldiers, Penguin has it. And as far as war novels go, I think it's pretty darn good. Personally, I liked it better than All Quiet on the Western Front, but that's a matter of taste, I suppose. Everybody says that is the one classic that you must do. Not so for me. I find that after a while, and I've read a few war novels, that they sort of fall into certain patterns. So I think even in the Finnish authors, that's the one I just mentioned, there's sort of the brewing liquor in the moonshine still or whatever, some stuff like that. I mean, that kind of theme crops up in these novels if you're talking about the day-to-day life of soldiers in the military. But again, I speak highly of the poetry, and I don't think you should miss out on that. So check out Steve's video. If you're trying to get a comprehensive overview of the subject in literature, I think that his suggestions cannot take you in a wrong direction. I just thought I would add my 2 cents and tell you what I thought about the very few things that I have read pertaining to war and how they've impacted me a little bit. So, thank you very much for stopping by.